an unlikely tour
Does anybody know what a Superfund site is?
on the history of pollution.
The mud on the bottom of the river is contaminated, and that's for over 100 years of industrial contamination.
The boat ride designed to teach people in the Seattle neighborhood of South Park about the contaminated river that borders their homes. While progress has been made in cleaning up the Duwamish River, the neighborhood faces another threat: contamination that could spread if the area floods. And South Park residents are not alone. An Associated Press analysis shows that nearly 2 million people live within 1 mile of toxic sites located in flood-prone areas or that are vulnerable to sea level rise. The AP identified 327 such sites after reviewing flood zone maps, census data, and records from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. This year's historic hurricane season exposed the little-known public threat: highly polluted sites can be inundated by floodwaters, potentially spreading toxic contamination. During Hurricane Harvey, more than a dozen Superfund sites were flooded in Houston, with breaches reported at 2 of them.
And everything was coated with this, all the tools I've been cleaning, everything, the cars, it's a soot, it's a slimy, I don't know, it's almost like, it's nasty.
In 2014, the EPA said prolonged flooding at low-lying Superfund sites could cause extensive damage. But under the Trump administration, a Superfund task force report makes no mention of flood risk due to stronger storms or rising seas, and the White House's proposed 2018 budget seeks to slash cleanup funding. In response, an EPA spokesman said, quote, "Despite fear-mongering from the Associated Press, not a single dollar has actually been eliminated, as Congress still hasn't passed a budget." Some of the 327 sites have had at least some work done to help mitigate the threat to public health. The vulnerable sites are scattered across the nation, but Florida, New Jersey, California, and Washington have the most people living near them in mostly low-income, heavily minority neighborhoods.
I hope they clean it up so the river is not contaminated anymore.
Besides rising sea levels, scientists say climate change will result in more intense storms that could bring heavy rainfalls to rivers and other waterways.
Floods of the future are going to be bigger and sometimes even in new places, enlarging the floodplain than they have in the past.
Tony Leisner has lived near Florida's Stauffer Chemical Superfund site all his life, and his concerns have gone up with the water levels.
I've got some commercial real estate, and I would not be a buyer. Our water levels do keep rising. There is going to be infiltration there.
Back in Seattle, officials estimate the rest of the river near South Park will be cleaned up in the next 2 decades.
But the Superfund, it's the same thing. We can't afford to live anywhere else in Seattle, so we do the best we can here.
But that timetable does little to contain the worry about the contamination spreading beyond these banks. Ned Barker, Associated Press.